Reem, welcome to the Staying Alive and Rich podcast. I'm super excited to have you on the show today, and I can't wait to explore where we go with some of our topics today. You've got so much experience through your Dreem Coaching and Consulting business, but you've also been in pharmaceuticals, and your repertoire and reputation is incredible. And so I'm so fortunate and grateful to have you on the show today. So welcome.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction, actually. Thank you. And it's great to be here. I'm so excited to be here too.
I'm so excited too because you've had so much experience with obviously in the pharmaceutical industry. So, tell us a little bit about your background before we go into some of the juicy topics we want to talk about today, as obviously as women, but not only women, everyone actually that's trying to carve out their path, whether it's career-wise or personal development or whatever the case may be. You've got, I was on your blog earlier last week reading some of your great blogs, and there's a few there that I've actually printed off. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use that. That's actually really good advice. So tell us first how, what's your background and how you got into coaching and personal development.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'd love to. So I'm going to take a story back probably about, it's interesting when you start saying 2.5 decades ago. It's even more than 2.5 decades ago. And you start going, wow, time has really flown by. But after university, I did a Bachelor of Commerce degree, majoring in, I had 3 majors, and then I went on to do a postgraduate diploma. So I was working a lot in waitressing and things like that. So I was always very focused on achieving things. Once I finished the postgrad, which was a lot of fun, I started going from job to job, and I'm sure a lot of us did this. I was just testing things out, didn't like that. I noticed that he was a supposedly smart lady. No one had never called me smart. No one had ever said to me, you don't have potential. But I didn't know what I wanted, and I was jumping from job to job, and they weren't quite working out. I felt like I was losing my confidence in some stages, the real world. Basically, I went into the real world.
Yeah.
And I went, wow, this is not what I expected, and you had to really forge through the real world. And I'd had a lot of dreaming, but I'd never solidified that dream. And I was doing so much, and I was trying so hard, so hard, and nothing seemed to stick. And I'm looking around me, you look around and you go, but hang on a second, there's something wrong with this equation. I was brokenhearted, so my relationships weren't working out. I didn't have a penny to my name. I'd had like $1,500 to my name, but I'd had to pay my car registration a couple of months. A job that I was in, I didn't really enjoy at all. Like when we say at all, it was waking up in the morning, I felt like throwing up every time I wanted to go to work.
Oh, wow.
So it'll give you sort of an idea. But I'm going, is this life? I don't understand it, and I'm meant to be smart and articulate and sociable and, that sort of thing. And I had expectations. I went, what's going on? And at that point, you can really start to blame everything around you, or you can focus on yourself and go, what am I doing? Okay, because I couldn't keep blaming at some point you have to say, it's not my employer. It's me at some point, right?
Yeah, if you have that tiny bit of awareness, you go, am I contributing to this equation? And in what way am I contributing to this equation? Yeah,
exactly. And none of it was negative. They weren't bad. I just kept hopping, and I kept moving cities, and I kept thinking that it was outside of me. I'll go, and to give you a background, I've lived in a lot of different areas, and some of that, and a lot of different parts of the world, and in some ways that's my strength, and in other ways it's my weakness. It was my strength in that I got to know a lot and see a lot and do a lot. But on the same side, every time something got a little bit difficult, my answer to everything was just move. Go get another job. Yeah, it was that kind of thing. So there was a bit of a, dare I say, come to Jesus conversation with myself. I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, you are. You know what? I often say I had to take myself to the boardroom the other day and have a stern meeting with myself.
Yeah, it was one of those things. And I went, right, what's going on? Yeah. And I looked around and I went, I need to, what was happening is I was focusing on so much and doing so much. I was achieving very little. And that's when I got really clear. Now, I was really fortunate as well. And I know I need to cut a very long story short, but I was very fortunate in that there was a Harvard Business Review that sort of came out around the same time as I was going through this. And it was called The Making of a Corporate Athlete.
Oh, wow. The making of a corporate athlete. I like that.
The making of a corporate athlete. Like if you can go down, you can Google it, PDF it. If it's too much to read the whole research, now there's been so much like conduced blogs and articles about it. But this is just before the Sydney Olympics or just during Sydney. I can't remember. Look, it's been a couple of decades, so I can't quite remember the timing. But what I saw there, and the reason why I was so fortunate is because I had a sister that was 10 years younger than me who's a 4-time Australian Olympian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a lot. We can explore a lot here, right? But I was very fortunate. And why I was even more fortunate is because my mum was so busy with 3 kids, 2 jobs, doing a PhD, that when I got my license in year 11, they gave me a car. I mean, they had no money, but they gave me this. It wasn't a great car, but it was a car. I was like stoked. And I went, wow, I've got a car. But little did I realize that it was because my mum wanted me to pick up my sister after school every day, get her home, feed her, give her some food, give her, change her and take her to training and then bring her back home. So that was what I was doing day in, day out, day in, day out. So by the time, if you fast forward 10, 11 years, I've been doing that. And I just moved with my sister to Sydney because there was a 2000 Olympics. My parents were freaking out because she wanted to move here on her own. I said, don't worry, nothing's working out for me anyway in Melbourne, so I'll move to Sydney because that was my idea of how to overcome my own problems, right? And so I moved to Sydney. This thing literally lands in my lap and I'm reading and I'm going, wow, I know this. I might not be an athlete because I'm not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but I can be a corporate athlete.
So the penny dropped. You had a light bulb moment.
It was like bang. It was like everything just aligned. I could do that. So it was, and I'd seen my sister train, what athletes are like. They have to train twice a day, morning, night, 6 days a week. And they're doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Repetition. Yeah.
Okay. And it was all about, this corporate athlete part was all around the performance management. So it was all around addressing the body, the emotions, and the mind.
Of course, because they need to be in sync so you get the optimum. My sister played tennis professionally, so I completely understand where you're coming from. And, and my brother's a professional athlete or has been a professional athlete as well. So I kind of understand, and my dad. So it kind of runs in my family. And I can understand the focus and what it means to have that mind-body connection on every level. And it's difficult to do continuously and persistently, and specifically I can remember with my sister, like when she was in her A game, she'd smash, her tennis tournament. But if something wasn't right, just a little bit off, whether it's just sleep deprivation or she had a disagreement with, me or my brother or my parents, it would just throw her off her game, and
exactly.
And athletes are incredibly disciplined, aren't they? Incredibly disciplined. I mean, all the ones that I've had the pleasure of speaking to, inclusive of a family and friends, have all kind of like, nah, there's just no compromise. This is what I need to do. This is the time I get up. This is what I need to feed my body. This is how much I need to sleep. Like they're incredibly disciplined because they understand the importance of everything having to work together. Yeah?
Yep, and that's exactly it. And so then it was a question, well, how do you transfer that into the corporate world? And if you fast forward 20 years later, I went from seeing what living and breathing what an elite athlete looks like, then changing into becoming the corporate athlete, but now I want to become the entrepreneurial athlete. But you can see the transition, and I went, I can do this. Understanding how the mind, the body, and the mind, the body, and then the health works and the physical works. I went, okay, I can understand this. I can do this. So long as there's, you need a couple of things, right? And I think the most important thing is consistency, or as you said, discipline. Discipline is nothing more. You give yourself a command and you do it. So imagine, consistency is key to it, understanding how the mind works, and then the emotional management. If I was to
Yes.
put anything, it's in our own, because we're emotional creatures, all of
Would you
us,
say
every single one of us.
would you say they're the main principles of how to be able to transition, as you said, into the corporate athlete and then the entrepreneurial athlete, like the consistency, the discipline, and emotional management?
Emotional management. So there's a lot of little bits and pieces that come into it,
Mm,
because then you have to understand how the mind works. So
mm,
where does resilience play in this? Where does contrast? What does contrast play in this as well?
yeah.
What do the negative emotions? What role does negative emotion play in it? Because we make assumptions, and what definitions are we putting on all those assumptions? We make certain assumptions that having a negative feeling is bad, being hard on ourselves is bad, then having the imposter syndrome, like not feeling good about ourselves, is bad. Why is it negative? Well, what if you were to turn all of that into how do I define it differently to help me to get to where I want? Given that we know that everyone's going to go through
Mm,
some kind of doubt, fear, worry at some stage
mm, mm,
in every single part of their life.
100%. Well, it's innate in us as humans, isn't it? To at some point in our
It
life,
is.
Question, doubt, become fearful and what have you. And overcoming
Well,
those is a challenge
exactly.
sometimes, isn't it?
And it's a daily basis. It's understanding that we need. Once you have understanding, then you know what to do with it. So you have to become aware of things. That's the biggest thing, is become aware of your own feelings, your emotions, your own desires. You have to become very, very aware of them. And then you can manage them. Then you can understand where you're going to take it.
How did you okay, so you've come to Sydney, and you've had this light bulb moment and gone, you know what, you've read the research and you've gone, I can actually apply that. So tell me about your
That's
own
a good question.
personal journey. Like, obviously, like
Yeah.
everything, it's not easy, especially when you kind of, it sounds easy on paper because you go, well, that kind of sounds like it makes sense. I'm going to apply it. And obviously once you start applying it, it's when you start to hit those roadblocks or those challenges.
Yeah, no.
So tell me
100%.
about so how did you, what were some of the first things that you noticed as you started to kind of carve out that pathway?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, it was about that going internal and going, what's not working? What is it? What's going on? And I realized how much I was doing so much, producing very little.
Did you do that on your own, or did you actually seek help? Like, because you
So
need to
at
have a
this
level of
stage,
awareness to go into. Because I mean, I've spoken to loads of people; they have no idea about their inner world. Like you would have to have a high level of awareness to go in and go, okay, what am I doing? What do I need to change? Did you?
Yeah. Well, there's two things that happen there. Well, look, I've always had great mentors and great coaches, and it started with my mum as being the first. And we'll get onto hopefully this story, my mum's story. She's an incredible woman. I've just been, again, very, very fortunate, and it does play an impact.
Yeah.
And so, from her perspective, it was always, Reem, no matter what happens. This is something I learned from a very, very early age because of our background as well. But from a very early age, she used to say to me, Reem, no matter what happens to you in life, always come from a position of strength, not weakness. Even if it's your fault, even if it's a mistake that someone else had, but it doesn't matter. So don't ever play the victim. Always come from a position of strength.
That's good
and
advice.
The story behind that is incredible, because we would, I would go with her to school. She used to teach the visually impaired.
Okay.
And so I would go to school with her on some days off that I had off. And this is back in the Middle East. This is before we immigrated to Australia.
What background, just quickly, are you Reem?
So I'm Palestinian.
You're Palestinian. Okay. So yeah, hard place to live and bring up kids and do that. Wow. Incredible.
I can guarantee you that.
Yeah.
So I used to get into taxis, go from Haifa to Nazareth, where she would teach with her.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of kids my age at the time who had a lot of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one kid in particular, and he had been playing soccer one stage, and unfortunately he picked up this, what he thought was a shiny ball, and unfortunately it was a mine. It was a bomb. Okay, so to cut a really long story short, he lost his eyesight, he lost the skin around his head, he lost his arms. He didn't have, so up until sort of here, he didn't have one of his lower legs, from the knee down. So really, adversity. This is where adversity comes into it.
This is real adversity.
This is really adversity. And yet, when I would go to Mum's school in Nazareth, he was one of the brightest students. So by the time I got to him, he was totally blind, had lost his eyes, and he had lost his limbs. However, I mean, get this, right? He was the brightest student. He played the traditional drums, the durabaki it's called, like he's a pro, and he was playing basketball like a professional athlete, from a young person's point of view. And I looked at him in the house and how can he do that? How can he be like this? He went on to write books in poetry. He went and did his psychology degree and started working as a psychologist. So when I asked my mum, but I don't understand, Mum, look up, because I was like almost like taken aback by it, and I couldn't even understand how this was happening. And that's when she said to me, you always take, no matter what happens to you in life, always come from a position of strength, not weakness. Wow. In other words, don't play the victim ring. And
she's seen it. She's seen it firsthand in circumstances that we can't even comprehend here in Australia. Let's be realistic.
So So I came out to Australia when I was 14, and for me, I love this country. I mean, this is beautiful. We're Australian. My kids are Australian. Everything about us is Australian. But at the same time, everything in comparison becomes, well, I can't be a victim. So what? Someone said you can't have this job. So what? Someone put something in front of me that wasn't to my liking. So what? So that's where that was my first real coach, is my mum.
Bless. That's very powerful too. Do you know what?
It is.
Salvaging that victim mentality, which let's face it, a lot of us fall into. It's like, oh, why me? This always happens to me. But actually coming from that position of power and flipping it on its head and going, well, you know what? That wasn't meant for me, so move on to the next thing. Or, okay, I tried, I failed. Exactly. It's time to dust off. What did I learn? And keep moving. It's such a strong thing. And we don't hear it enough, I feel, in our culture. And I think your mum's an incredible woman, given what she has had to face, obviously, in her own career, is able to take that and pass it on to her family. I think it's very, very
absolutely. Important. But I also have always had coaches. I've always thought coaches are very important. I've always had mentors. This for me is like looking to where I want to go, because when I got to this point, I thought, well, what do I actually want? This is even if you had this review, and even if you had the most encouraging mother, it's like, do you actually know what you want? And that was part of the problem. I didn't know what I wanted. So then I had to think very clearly about what I want and think about the top 3 things and put that in place and follow that with laser-like focus, incorporating the becoming of a corporate athlete sort of philosophy into my work life. And that's how I entered, to get into the pharmaceutical industry at the time.
Yeah.
It's such a funny story. I got rejected for 6 months. I was here in Sydney. Oh, God, yeah. My goodness.
That's character building, isn't it?
Look, nothing like rejection, I tell you. And I laugh now. I laugh now, but let me tell you, there was a lot of heartache at the time. But
I could imagine.
It was the best journey. But even the very first interview I went to in the pharmaceutical industry, the lady after 10 minutes got up and she said, Dreem, you will never, ever, ever get a job in the pharmaceutical industry. This interview's over.
Oh, my God.
And I know you can imagine
what possesses that. You might think that, but you would never verbally actually. So did you ask her why?
No, I didn't have enough at the time. I didn't have enough courage at the time. I would now, but we're talking about when I was young, a lot younger, and I was quite shy. While I was strong, I was shy as well. And I didn't have all that belief in internally I did, but externally I didn't. There was a lot of things going on. And I was brokenhearted. I was, an engagement that just broke up. There's a whole bunch of things going on at the same time. But I think, this is hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. I did not prepare for that interview. Okay, she was a bit harsh, but it was also, let's look at it. I had no idea what the pharmaceutical industry was. I had no idea what I was applying for. And just went in there thinking, I'll just give it a go. So at least it taught me, okay, next interview, I better prepare for it.
Yeah.
And so I kept going for interviews. I kept getting better and better. It took me 6 months.
Wow.
Of going to interviews, 6 companies. And then finally,
So
Finally, the right
what was
one
it
said
like
yes.
after 6 months when they finally said, hey, you've got the job? How explain to me how you felt after 6 months of being rejected.
I know. Look, imagine now. I mean, I'd go to 6 interviews, and at the 6th interview, they go, nah, you're not the one. And well, it felt really quite surreal at the time, because I remember a really good friend of mine said to me, Reem, just give up. What are you doing? They just don't want you.
Oh,
And I'm going,
thanks.
no, I don't want to. I don't. But everything that's said to me is said with love. Okay.
Yeah.
No one meant it in a bad way. Everyone just says what they know. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'd been taught. But when I did, it was really interesting. The job that I did end up getting, it took 3 days, 3 consecutive interviews, and just a yes.
Oh, wow.
And it was so quick, and it just happened. I'm like going, what the, that sort of thing. But I had applied for this, and this is resilience, right? When I look back at this young girl, I had applied to this company 3 times, and the first 2 times they said no. In the end, I actually wrote and said, "Look, you've said no to me 3 times. At some stage, you're going to have to see me."
Yeah,
like I was just bold. I've got nothing else to lose now.
There's something interesting you just said then, and I know exactly where you go. You get to a point, or you get to a place where you go, I don't want to swear, but I am. Fuck it. What's the worst that can happen?
I love those words. No, seriously. Those are the most powerful words you can ever say in a loving way, right?
In a loving way. It's like, you know what? It's I'm going to put myself out there. They're either going to love me or hate me. I don't care anymore. And that's when, bang, magic happens for whatever reason.
Well, it did. And obviously they wanted to see someone who was gutsy, who had resilience, because I was going into a space of pharmaceuticals and generics. So it wasn't the brand pharma, it was generics, where you had to be a gutsy salesperson. You had to go into pharmacies and be ready to get kicked out of pharmacies, because generics was such a new topic in the industry.
Yes. How long ago was that, Reem?
This is, again, back in 1999, 1998 I started with them.
Yeah. You're right. That was you were just on the precipice. So a lot of pharmacists had no idea about that sort of technology.
They had no idea.
And all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And it was the change mechanism for them was very hard. And you had the branded companies calling us the cowboys of the industry. There's a whole bunch of things. But geez, it was fun. So I did when I did get the job, I just went, wow, I finally got it.
Wow.
That's amazing. But it was so quick. It was so fast.
Wow.
And I think, that was another lesson for me, is just that eventually everything will happen in the right way at the right time.
Yeah. And it's always the case. Yeah. And there's a saying, and I don't know where I got this, where I heard this. I know I've heard it somewhere on probably some podcast or some motivational speech. You're only ready to receive when you're ready to receive. And it's the same as you're only ready to hear when you're ready to hear. I could be telling you the same thing over and over and over and over again, and you won't hear it. And then one day I'll say it, and finally it'll sink. Yeah. It's interesting.
100%. And that's okay. When you're ready, you will know. And everything will fall into place. So that's where consistency comes into it. The trick is to be consistent. The trick is not to give up, because you don't know what's around the corner. And it will gel at some stage. It will fuse and it will gel, and it will happen. Now, I mean, after I got the job, though, that was getting the job was one thing. But after getting the job, it was like, that's when really all the babe in the woods came around, and I went, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've never been a salesperson before. I don't even know how to pronounce half these molecules. I don't know what they do. Who the hell do I think I am? And I've got these big, massive budgets over my head, that sort of thing. And that's when really the imposter syndrome started to set in, and the doubt, fear, worry, and the overcompensating and working really hard, trying to, it was all by trial and error.
It's, you know what, and this is where I want to delve in a little deeper, because in a world today, I mean, I know you're talking about the late 90s, but today we find, and a lot of women that I've spoken to, and I shouldn't say women, because also a lot of men and individuals that I've spoken to that are, highly successful in their own right, are great people, have got this tiny little part of them that seems to just get louder and louder in their head, and that is that imposter. Am I doing the right thing? Maybe people can see through me. I really don't know what I'm doing. Am I doing what and I'm putting my hand up. I'm one of those, right? There have been so many moments through my career, especially with what I'm doing now. I'm not a journalist. I've never been on live TV or any of that sort of stuff. And every single time I do a podcast, I literally shit myself because I do. You know what? I'm gonna say it. You know why? Because I think, oh my gosh, there's so many professionals out there that sound so good, that conduct interviews so well. Who's going to want to listen to me? What have I got to say? And what if I embarrass and all these thoughts go in my head until I sit in front of the microphone, and then it just kind of all blocks away. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. You've got it. What do you got to lose? A few random comments here and there. That's fine. I've got this. But it can get overwhelming, those fears and those doubts and all those things that you just described are really hard to navigate sometimes. And some days it's fine, but some days it's like when you're not feeling it and you're concerned, or you've got someone that's or you have people around you that are better than you in certain things, you can't help but kind of, withdraw a little bit and start questioning all those things. How do you navigate that? That's a
very good question. It's a very big topic. It's a very, very big topic. But
it's a massive one. Then you've got social media as well. Then you've got to contend with that. The young one's got to contend with that as well.
Well, let's just break it down to the lowest common denominator, because that's what I always simply do. There is a lot to talk about. I mean, to begin with, the imposter syndrome, whether you're male or female, at some stage, and whether you acknowledge it or not, at some stage in life you're going to experience doubt, fear, worry. And what is the imposter syndrome? All it is that you feel like someone's going to find out that maybe you're not as good as what they think that you should be, or you think that they should think that you should be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a challenge. It's not about, it's what do I think that you think of me? Not what do you think of me? So that's what you're doing to me right now, for example, on doing a podcast. You're not saying you're not actually asking what do I think of you. You're interpreting what I think of you.
It's true.
What you think that I think of you, which is just a reflection of what you think of you, not me.
Am I worthy to be having this conversation and this podcast with you? Is probably a more honest, way of looking at it.
Do you know what I'm saying? 100%. And so what? Like then the question becomes, and the way the behaviour manifests itself is just different to males and females, but we all go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And with females, because of the conditioning, because of our DNA, one could argue also because of the our genetics as well. So we bring
cultural upbringing and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So it's both nurture and nature, but we just tend to sort of overlay this thing over every part of our life. Is he good enough? Am I good enough for him? Am I a good mum? Am I going to be good in the corporation? Can I actually get that promotion? Whatever it may be, we tend to ask those questions. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But where it becomes not conducive, it's actually, I find it that we have to redefine all of this. Rather than going, it's hard, it's not easy, it's challenging, just understanding that it's normal, it's natural. This is our survival instinct. This has got nothing to do with you or me. It's the way our brains are designed, and it's part of our survival instinct. Being scared is important because then you watch out for where is the threat, where is a lion.
It makes you a little more alert, doesn't it?
It's that alertness, right? So as long as you understand it. Now, all that's happened is because our prehistoric brain just hasn't caught up to the technology of this world, we equate a podcast and an email and someone telling us we're not good enough, or our hair's not nice, or we're too old, too young, too small, too whatever, as if it's a lion that's going to come and eat us and we're going to die. So it's just our survival mechanism. As soon as you understand that survival mechanism, and I'm trying to simplify
it. Yeah.
As soon as you start to understand that, well, okay, then you go, well, what's my self-talk going to be like? Now that I know that this thought is okay, the thought itself is fine. The thought has never, ever, ever, it's not going to damage you in any way. If you redefine it, and if you redefine the assumption behind the belief that you're about to make, after that thought. Because a belief is nothing than a thought that you've told yourself enough times. And on a subconscious level, you've actually, you've accepted it. You've allowed yourself to accept it, which is fine again. So you go, well, what assumption have I made? It's not, and I when I work with, very successful women in executive roles who within their own rights, you just like go, wow, amazing from the outside. Then you start to work with them one-on-one and you see all the doubts, fears, worries that comes out in them. And you go, well, where's that coming from and how can you redefine it? And what impact is that having on your health? And what impact is it having on your total results? And how much better can you be doing if you were thinking slightly differently, feeling slightly differently, and behaving slightly differently?
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things you also said was, and part of that imposter syndrome is we tend to overcompensate, or or people please, if you will, and is that like if you can't catch yourself thinking, because I know sometimes, you don't catch yourself thinking, you do go into that autopilot as you described earlier, things just kind of happen automatically on a subconscious level because you've been kind of used to doing that, or your response, your natural response is to blah, blah, blah. In terms of overcompensate, what are some of the signs that if you can't catch yourself or you can't catch that thought process, but you're finding you're working longer, or you're overcompensating with your kids or family or bosses or all that sort of stuff, is that a kind of a good barometer to kind of, put the brakes on a little bit and go, hang on, what am I doing?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's three areas. Like, yeah, that's a very good question. How do I notice? Well, there's practices. We all have to come to a point, and we have to accept this for ourselves, that I need to just become a lot more aware, because it's an awareness that once you're aware of something, 95% of the job is done.
Yeah.
So the question then is, what kind of mindset do I have? Do I have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? Now, let me expand on that, because it's very easy. Most people just say to you, oh, of course I've got a growth mindset. Okay. So
what is a growth mindset? And
okay, I mean, this is it. Of course, everyone will say, oh, no, I've got a growth mindset. I read a lot, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I talk to people. And, this conversation that you and I are having, anyone can have this conversation. It's an easy conversation. And now with Dr. Google and AI and anything like that, there's nothing that's not available to us. The big question becomes, are you willing to do the work and open up your mind to entertain new ideas? So that's what a growth mindset is. It's not, as soon as you hear yourself going, oh, I know that, and I know that, and I know that, well, then that's a fixed mindset, because you're not entertaining new ideas. As soon as you say, that's wrong, and something's black and white, that's a fixed idea. You're not entertaining new ideas. As soon as I promote an idea to you that's way out of your realm, and you have been brought up in a completely different way, and you're not willing to look at it, at the very minimum, look at it before you accept it or reject it, that's a fixed mindset. It doesn't matter what it is. You cannot, and especially when you talk about social media, because we're consuming so much of it now in such little amounts, just like this. Quick scroll. Or is it like this? Sorry, it's just the other way. So you can tell I'm not scrolling anymore. But it's actually like this.
I just hold it and it does it on its own. It just keeps flicking now.
But you go, okay, are we actually questioning anything? Or are we just believing everything that we're seeing? And so therefore, what's happening is the second we accept an idea without actually entertaining it, or we reject an idea without entertaining it, we're developing these belief systems at a subconscious level without questioning it.
And that's the danger, isn't it? That's the danger, because I do believe you do need to, you do need to have an open mindset, I believe. It doesn't matter if you know something to the nth degree. I think you always, you need to listen to it like it's the first time you've heard it, right? Even if you know it.
Every time.
Because you know what? When you go when you go, and I read this was really good advice that I read in a book. And again, I don't know which book it is, so I'm not going to quote the author because I might get it wrong, but it's an old book, and I might be wrong, so please don't hate me, people. I think it might have been Carl Jung.
No, I won't. No one's going to hate you.
I think it might have been Carl Jung that said, always the ability to be open is to be able to look, even though you know and understand something, is to be able to listen to it like it's the first time you've heard it, right? And I think that's important.
Exactly.
I think that's super, super important regardless of what you do and where you are, because when you do that, you'll always find that you learn something new. You might learn something new about that individual's experience from where they're coming from, or you might just learn something new about what you already knew and go, or reaffirm what you already know and go, oh, okay, you know what? So, yep, that is the same.
Exactly.
I think it's super, super
100%. So it's not about, and here's the thing, it's not about whether or not you're going to accept. You can accept or reject afterwards anyway, as long as you ask all the right questions. So when you ask me, it's hard, and if you don't catch your thoughts, no, we don't always catch our thoughts, but you've got 3 levels. You've got the feelings, you've got the thoughts, you've got the feelings, and then you've got the actions. Right? The easiest thing, especially for women, because we're geared up to be in tune with our feelings quite a lot easier. Right? So you go, do I feel good about this? Is this right? This is me making, how you can feel that knot here or in your stomach or wherever, or in your throat, whatever. For me, it's usually in the heart. It hits me right here. And I can go, oh, I don't really like that feeling. I can say that to myself. And then I thought, well, what thought? Because a feeling is only triggered by a thought. Okay, well, what thought did I have? And what thought have I repeated often enough? That am I starting to have that feeling? Now, if I don't notice the feeling, then I can go to the behaviour or the outcome that I just got. And when you don't like something. When something works your way, high five, everything feels aligned, everything's great, but it doesn't go your way. Well, that triggers even more feelings. And you go, well, okay, I didn't like what just happened, the result that just happened. Let me go back to how was I feeling at the time? So therefore, what thought did I have? And then therefore you can take, well, what assumption did I make behind that thought?
Interesting.
And you can go back and forth and up and down and constantly keep doing that. But again, it just takes a little bit of practice, and you have to want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's key, yeah.
Most people don't like to, actually, who was it? It was George Bernard Shaw. I love this one. He said 2% of people think, 3% of people think they think, and 95% of people would rather die than think.
I sway between all of
my
them.
Personality.
I'm going to tell you right. I sway between all of them.
As do we all. We all do. But I thought, look, that suits my personality. I love that kind of thing, because a lot of times I go, I might be over 95% right now. Would I rather die than think? Yeah. Because I don't want to feel the pain, because I don't want to attack my own ego, because the ego comes into play, and I don't want to say I'm wrong. And I go, does it really matter that much? So you can start to ask yourself questions. And now this is where it becomes really important. The quality of your leadership, the quality of your life is only determined by the quality of the questions you ask, not the solutions that you come up with. Most people jump to, I just need a solution. How about just asking yourself questions first?
What would you ask? So what are some of the questions that you would ask? What are some of the questions you would ask yourself? Right.
So if I was,
no, go on. Sorry.
Well, let's look at the podcast right now. Okay. This podcast. You said you're a bit nervous, and I'm obviously I would be nervous too. I was nervous too. I always get. I like that nervous tension. That's a bit of excitement. Sometimes, if it's really nervous, I feel like I'm going to throw up or something. Some people hide. Some people run. Some people fight it. But the question that I just go, okay, what are you scared of? That's a good question to start off.
What are you afraid of?
And I go, well, what if I stuff up? I said, well, what evidence do you have? This is my next question. Reem, what evidence do you have that you're going to stuff up? And you ask yourself that question. What evidence do you have that you have no right to be behind a microphone interviewing people in journalism? Apart from the ones that you made up.
Okay.
Which is just made up crap.
Yeah. You're right.
Right, so then I go, okay, I have no evidence. Well, then you go back to one of the most important questions that we can ever ask ourselves, and I think I mentioned this a little bit beforehand. What do I want? What do I want? Most of us know exactly what we don't want, and we spend far too much time on what we don't want, rather than saying, well, if I had a clearly defined goal, a clearly defined vision, what would I want?
Interesting.
What would it be? And then you put yourself in that position as if it's already happened.
Yeah, yeah.
The athletes do this all the time.
Yes.
Again, my sister was a 10-meter platform diver.
Oh, wow. Bravo.
Right?
Wow.
And what they, I love the way, did you say bravo?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Bravo.
Bravo. It's a big bravo for all the Eastern Europeans out there. It's absolutely. A bravo. You know, jumping off a platform and freaking being an Australian gold medal or, you know, in the Olympics. That's fantastic. Did she win any medals?
So she's a 2-time back-to-back Commonwealth gold medalist.
Bravo.
And
that's a double bravo.
She won. Yes, it is. It is. And she's also a silver and bronze Olympic medalist.
That's phenomenal.
I mean, she's got this, and I'm just like minimizing the story. It's a massive story. She's been retired for some time. That's another story.
That's another podcast.
But that's another point. It really is. But the point though of that is that you just have to ask yourself the questions and go, what evidence do I have, and then what do I want? If you look at athletes, they have to rehearse every single move well beforehand. They've already done the dive before they do the dive.
That's right.
They've already worked out how they've landed. This is not woo-woo stuff.
No, it's not. It's not. It's the faculty of imagination and actually seeing yourself in that goal as though you're living it. There's a American mystic, an old mystic called Neville Goddard, and he talks a lot about the power of the imagination. I don't know if you've heard of him. Maybe he's not many people.
I'm reading The Power. I've read his book, The Power of Assumption. I'm on my 4th go right now.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
Power of Assumption.
Yeah.
And it really, it's so. Now, the stuff that he talks about has been with us since the beginning of time.
Oh,
Sophocles would talk about it. All the ancient Greek, Roman philosophers, the Far Eastern spiritualism discussed this way beyond imagination, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the first get-go. So nothing's really changed. It's all exactly the same. And the way that our mind works is that we see pictures and images, and it's always in the present tense. So your subconscious mind doesn't know whether something's really happening or not.
Or whether it's good or bad.
That's why when they say, or whether it's good or bad, but that's why they often say thoughts become things, because we keep thinking, we've got 60 to 90,000 thoughts per day. Now, on average, we're repeating 95% of those thoughts every day, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And on average, if we're not careful, 80% of them are going to be negative. So then you start creating all these habits and all these paradigms of about things that you've told your subconscious mind is true, because it sees every single word that you're talking about. Everything you say to yourself, you're seeing it in an image in the present tense as if it's already happened. Now, it's not, am I going to have lots and lots of thoughts and am I going to repeat them? It's a question now. It goes back to Neville's work, Power of Awareness or Power of Imagination. He's written a lot. And you go, well, what do I want to think? We have choices here. That's where our choice is. It's not, am I going to think? Am I going to have thoughts? Am I going to repeat them? Am I going to have habits? That's not the choice. The choice is what thoughts, what feelings, what actions, what habits am I going to create?
And what is it going to take?
I know what I would rather.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more. And once you've you start to categorize your thoughts a little better, and I use the word categorize really, really loosely because everyone has their own goals and ideas of what they want in life. For some, it's career. For others, it's sports or what have you. But once you begin to categorize those thoughts in a way that's in line with your what I want or your goal, then it starts to kind of slowly move ahead. Am I right in saying that?
Well, you're creating it. If you see it, that nothing's ever been created before you actually see it on the screen of your mind. Nothing. You cannot create something. So, for example, Wi-Fi, technology for Wi-Fi has been around with us since Earth started. It's just that we came to a point where we could, because someone started imagining it. And it probably started with the fax machine. It started with whoever it may be. And here we are. I mean, today now, just with our mobiles alone, we're all carrying a mobile in our back pocket. We've got more technology in that mobile than what put man on the moon.
Yeah, we do.
But someone had to actually see that image. So the question is not, am I going to create an image on the screen of my mind? It's what image do I want to create? So if we go back to that simple example that you gave, which I thought was a brilliant example, who do I think I am? What if I'm, well, the question shouldn't be who do I think I am, it's the question who do I think I'm not?
Mm.
Who am I not to show the world what it is that I have? Why play it little? What right do you have not to do this?
I love that. Why play it little? Isn't it interesting? I love that. And you know what? Now that you said that, it's so true. So many people out there think the same. They're like, I'll just do this, and if it works, if it doesn't, and it's just like, why play it big? You know, what's the saying? Reach for
absolutely.
the stars and touch the sky.
And exactly. And you know, what if you reach even beyond the sky, the stars? You don't know. Who are you to put those barriers in front of ourselves and in front of yourself? And that's what the imposter syndrome is. Until we start to understand why it's happening and how we can make it work for us, it always will stop us in our tracks. And you see it time and time again. Like I've had people in executive coaching, and they're so successful, say to me, and in their 50s even, I still don't want to know what I want to be when I grow up, Reem.
Wow. How do you respond to that, Reem? Like when you have an established, middle-aged person at the top of their game, really kicking goals, and they go, I still don't know if I like this, or I still don't know what I'm going to do. What's your response as a coach? What's your initial response to that?
Well, first of all, I love it because they've been very honest and open.
Yeah.
That's the key to it. When you find a coach, you want to make sure they're the right person that you're comfortable with, that you're going to open to, that's not going to judge you, has got the life experience as well. Because the reality is you'll never know what you want to do when you grow up, because we have different phases in our lives, and you get to where it is that you want to, and you go, it is it. Once you achieving a goal, you achieve the goal, and you go, what's next? By nature, our nature wants to keep growing. But the day we don't grow is the day we die.
It's true.
True. So just expect that every so often, every 5 years, every 3 years, every 10 years, whatever it is for each person, it's individual, you're going to come to a crossroad and you need to work out, well, what's next?
What are some of the steps or some of the questions that you would encourage people, or thoughts that you would encourage people to think about to kind of clarify a little bit what they want?
No, that's a very good question. First of all, you have to go into a dreaming state for this, right? You really need to understand how the mind works. And there's a reason why I call the company Dreem Coaching and Consulting. I mean, I know my name is REEM. You just throw a D in the front, you've got dream.
I love the play on words. I love it. It works.
It is. But it really is it goes beyond that. Everything has to start with a dream. I mean, when you talk about strategic planning, when companies go into this 5-year strategic planning, spend a lot of, all it is visualization, right? In a very strategic way, much more complicated way. So you have to start with, well, what is it that I want? Now, a lot of people may not have spent a lot of time in silence to know what they want.
This is true.
The first thing I would ask people is just have you allowed yourself at least half an hour a day, or 20 minutes a day? If you don't have 20 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day where you turn everything off, do you actually sit with yourself alone and ask yourself, what do I want? And even if it doesn't come to you, most likely if you sat with yourself alone, what will come to you is what you don't want. And what a great place to start.
What you don't want.
Yeah, I mean, everyone can rattle off what they don't want really, really quickly.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I go, okay, let's just make it easy. You don't know what you want, but let me ask you, what don't you want? You just ask that question. And then as soon as you go, what I don't want, I go, well, what's opposite to that?
It's true.
The opposite of what you don't want is what you want. There's nothing more beautiful. And this is why most people see things bad that happen to them as a negative. I see things that happen to me, like the contrast, as wow, this just shows me exactly what I don't want, which is going to get me closer to what I do want. But again, it just goes back to how are you defining the situation and the problem and the thought and the feeling? How about we just stop defining things as bad? How about we go, this is an opportunity to ask questions, to find out what I want. If I know what I don't want, it gets me closer to what I do want.
Yeah. Makes sense. There's a lot
So
more
just write that
clarity.
down.
There's a lot more clarity in the contrast of what you said and the bipolar and the opposite of what you don't want. Because you're right. We all know what we don't want, right? But the minute we kind of flip it and go, well, what is it that you do want? You know, we might ramble off a couple of things, but we're quick to go back. Well, I don't want to be working long hours, and you know, I don't want to be paid minimal wages, and you know, I do want a big house, but da 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 da. You know, and it's interesting,
But it's always a but. It's always a but.
Yeah.
And when it gets to the point where it's really a lot of buts, rather than fight it, right? I don't fight it. I just go, okay, we'll rattle it off. Go for it. I want you to put it on. Go. Just take an hour if you want. Just tell me exactly what you don't want, as long as then you look at the opposite of it. So if you put 2 columns on one page, we put the opposite of it, and then we go and we cut what we don't want out and we throw it away, and then we start to focus on what we do want.
That's that's so much more clarity in that. So much more. That's a great exercise, actually.
It's a beautiful exercise. And here's the thing, the reason why you would do it with someone else, why you would choose a coach who can ask all the right questions, is because, you know, we all have a blind spot. If you look at Johari's window, it's an organizational psychology, framework. In Johari's window, one of the windows is our blind spots, but other people can see what we can't see.
Yeah.
About ourselves. And there's also a spot of what we know about ourselves, but unwilling to show other people. You want someone who's really good and who you're comfortable with to challenge you on both of those things.
That's true. And it's hard, and it almost needs to be someone that you don't know and that doesn't know you. I don't think it could be a friend or a family. I mean, it probably can be if they're willing to kind of, not be biased.
I'd suggest not, honestly. Yeah. No, I'd suggest not. You can take it to a certain level, and you really do have to have their permission from a family. Well, you have to have their permission anyway from as a coach. But if you're using, for example, your partner or your sister or your brother, there's a lot that's involved there. So it's a question of, you can use it to a certain level, but who's going to push you? Because you've got your own biases towards them. Because you grew up with them.
Exactly.
You want someone who's got no bias whatsoever, who's not going to judge, who's seen everything, who's made all the mistakes themselves as well, and who understands it and who knows what questions to ask. That's the other thing. Yeah. You need to be able to ask the questions. So it's kind of like challenging. Well, what evidence do you have to support this thought that you've got right now? And then people go, yeah, but you don't understand. Like, okay, well, let's just take it back a notch. Help me understand what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Okay, and what if you were to see it differently? And what assumption are you making behind that belief? And where did you learn that? And what do you want the future to look like? Because one of the things that we need to, this is simple yet so profound. If we have, according to research, we've got 400 billion bits of pieces of information coming at us in any 1 second.
How much? Can you repeat that number?
400 billion.
400 billion bits of information.
Okay, there's so much, right? Do you know how many we see or we become aware of?
I don't know, 1?
2,000. 2,000.
Wow.
So then the question becomes, is we're so narrow, and those 2,000 are based on, our cultural background, our experiences in life, what we've inherited. There's so much that comes into it, right? Our DNA. And so if we're only seeing 2,000 bits of information like this, at any point in time, how do you know what you think is true? There's no such, how are we, like the way the mechanics of the mind, okay, we have to look at the mechanics of the mind. And we go, I have no evidence to prove that in any situation I am true because there's so many other considerations and perceptions to be taken. And so the question then becomes, what questions am I going to ask to find what I'm not seeing? And who do I go to help me see what I'm not seeing? And what do I choose to believe? That's another really good question. What do I choose to believe today?
That's
Do I want to choose
that's
to
an
believe that I'm going to
important one.
stuff up?
Yeah, that's such an important one, especially in today's world when we've got like so much thrown at us in terms of obviously technology and social media. And I'll go back to social media again because it's I saw some stats the other day, which was by the time we die, we're going to spend 5 or 6 years on social media, like
6 years.
6 years,
6 years
wasted, and it's like, oh my God, 6 years just gone like that, just through scrolling and what have you. And everyone, even kids, these young kids that are coming through, they're already on iPads already, and that frightens me. It really, really does. It's like these kids, they're filling their minds with all this jargon. Some of it's good, but some of it's not that great. And even us as adults, how do you selectively sift through this process and only take on what's, because there are a lot of positive things on social media as well. It's not all bad. But, in today's world, with so much being thrown at us on top of everything else that goes around, as you mentioned earlier,
and it goes back to, I will not accept or reject any idea until I question it and I ask the questions. It's just that most of us don't want to ask questions. Most of us don't know. Most of us want to go straight to solution. Why? Why not? I mean, this is a beautiful thing that we've got here. This is the most beautiful thing. Just don't let it take control. You can't let it take control because it's also one of the most complicated, most bizarre. It's like the monkeys leading the zoo in here. It really is. And if you start to believe every single thought that you have, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You're in trouble. So rather than, it's good, you need to acknowledge it. You need to acknowledge all your feelings. It's okay we have sadness, we have the grief process. All of that is fabulous. And you have to go through it and there's no timing on it, but then you have to actually question every single thought. Why would you accept a thought before entertaining it?
And I guess questioning also helps manage your emotions. Am I right in saying that? Once
that's
you start
that's the emotional management.
Yeah,
that's emotional management there.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel. And here's the other thing, though. Most of us are not willing to sit in pain. Now, Buddha said it beautifully. Pain is inevitable. It's suffering that's the choice. So we equate pain with suffering. No, suffering is the choice. The pain is inevitable.
How do you differentiate the difference, though? How do you differentiate? Because suffering can be painful.
That's a good one. Well, that's very good. Are you playing from a position of strength, or are you playing from a position of weakness? Are you playing the victim? That's where suffering comes in.
Okay, got you.
So someone who's very strong. I mean, things happen to all of us. We go through. I mean, I've been rejected. I've had problems. We've all had our issues. You don't.
Of course.
No one's come through life without problems. The question is, are you feeling the pain and then asking yourself, well, what am I going to do with this from a laser-like focus and utilising everything that we've been discussing, or are you going to suffer through it and be the victim and blame everything external to you?
That's good, Reem. I love that. So suffering, you're playing on a subconscious level, you're playing the victim. But if you come from a strength of power, then you embrace the pain, you feel the pain, you acknowledge the pain, and then you can actually take that next step or whatever your next step is.
Exactly. So you feel the pain in here. And boy, sometimes it's really like, it's just, you feel like your heart's about to break into a zillion pieces, but just feel it, sit with it, allow it to rise. Don't suppress it. Don't blame anything externally. So that's where that extreme accountability comes into it. It's not your fault. Just take accountability. It's your responsibility. So whatever's happened to my life, not everything's my fault. I'm not going to I'm not that mug who takes everything's my fault. I'm going to blame me. That's another
podcast
paradigm that we create. And that imposter syndrome we end up blaming ourselves for everything. I'm not saying blame yourself, but take responsibility for everything because that's what's in your control. Yes, someone could have been an arsehole. Yes, someone could have treated you in the wrong way. It's not, it's not your fault. But you take responsibility for it and don't suffer through it. Feel the pain, cry, scream it out, do whatever it is that you need to do. But then, how am I going to take power? How am I going to rise up?
Rise above it.
Because this is life, right? This is life. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. No one can avoid that. Just like the tide goes in, the tide goes out, you can't avoid it. Don't even try. Why would you even want to avoid it. It's a beauty in life, right? The difference is that those people who've really mastered that emotional management, they understand that when they're down here, okay, they have to they say, well, what's in my control right now? And what can I do? I feel the pain. I understand it. It's not nice. But then what do I want? And they bring themselves back up again, back to the mountain, knowing full well that you're never going to stay up in the mountain. The only reason why it feels like you're always up in the mountain is because you know how to deal with it when you fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Get out of the pity party. Like we talk about the pity party, right? Just if you need to be in it for a little while, that's fine. Just don't bring, like you're in a pool, of the pity party, and then you bring the flamingos and you blow them up and you're swimming in your pity, and, you want to stay in there, and then you want to bring people in with you to swim with you with the flamingos in the pity party. It's just, how long do you want to be in there for?
That's the question, isn't it? How long do you want to sit there feeling sorry for yourself before you do something about it? Yeah.
And even if exactly, so and then you go, but you're allowed to feel sorry for yourself and still take action towards what you want.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, redefining everything. Yeah. You want to redefine every single one of your thoughts, redefine every single one of the situations that's happened, and then come from a position of that strength. And that's where, when I say my mum and that one sentence when I would have been no older than 9 years old, by the way, when she said that to me.
Wow. What a legend.
But it's been on repeat. And good. And so it's quite, absolutely, because what she had to go through as well. Obviously, someone taught her that, and someone taught them that, and so now it's time that we teach ourselves that.
And you do come from part of the world where it's always been unstable, and you have to look at your strength, and you have to come from a position of power in everyday life, in everyday things that you do, because just when you feel like you're perhaps suffering, there's, you described that young boy, imagine he's not coming from a position of feeling sorry for himself. He's gone, well, this is the card that God dealt me, and I'm gonna kick my goals anyway, and it's incredible. It's
literally.
I think we've lost that in today's society. I feel like the young ones today, as they're going, I know I'm going to generalize because this is, and I don't mean to, offend anyone, but I feel like that grit and that's that strength that your mum talks about comes with, with great adversity, comes with, great contrast. Yep. And you can see how grateful you are to be in a country where you're safe, and, and we're all safe, and, we're blessed to be able to make great livings and do the things, and that we have the freedoms that we have. And that comes with that experiencing what she'd experienced, and she parted that, she passed on that great sentiment to you and your sister and your families.
But this is why, well, you don't have to go through the same adversity. This is why to be able to realize it. But what you can do, this is why these podcasts are so important. Right. So now, if I want to go back to your original, who do I think I am? And I'm so glad you. And I know we're going to exaggerate what you're feeling.
It's okay. Exaggerate all you want. I'm used to it. It's fine.
But this is why it's so good to be able to demonstrate that. You go, well, again, you had this feeling of, who do I think I am? But it's a question of, well, what are you stopping people from learning? Because they don't get to hear this unless you had done this in the first place.
Well, do you know what? That's my why. My why is when I get like that and I go into that, oh my gosh, what if I muck this up, and what if this person doesn't really want to talk to me, and, blah, 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 and I get into that headspace, my thing is, well, you know what? It's not about me. It's not about you, Maria. Like, this is literally what I say to myself. Get over it. It's not about you. It's about Reem, and she's got some really relevant invitation that your audience and whoever out there in internet world needs to hear it. They're going to get some great value out of this. And your job is to facilitate Reem's knowledge and experience to the rest of the world, and then I just go in and do what I'm doing. That's how I get over it.
And so most, and you do well, and that, but it's actually good. And here's the thing: it's good to go through those thoughts because it makes you prepare. You've got paperwork that you prepare. It doesn't matter whether you use them or not. We've both prepared and we haven't used anything. But the point, but the preparation is the most important. And then once you come to this, then you have fun with it, right? You just have fun. So when you go through, when we talk about the imposter syndrome and the doubts, the fears, the worries, what it's stopping us from doing, because most females, I mean, we're talking about females here today, but it does apply to males as well.
Yeah.
They'll stop themselves from doing a lot of things that they would love to do, but they're too scared to do. Right? That's what the imposter syndrome does. So then the question is, do you really want to live your life like that? And so what else do you want to explore in your life? What else do you want to do? When you understand why you're having these feelings, what if, again, me thinking, for example, that what if I stuff it up when I get on this podcast, and what if I don't know what I'm saying, is the best thing that could ever happen to me.
True.
Because then it allows me to get in the zone, it allows me to do some thinking, it allows me to go on your other podcasts that I listen to go and do some homework, to understand myself, to reflect back on my own history, to do all of that, and then to come have fun with you. Because this is what this is. This is just fun. And so what we need to do is stop taking ourselves so seriously. This is the other thing about the imposter syndrome and corporate world and the entrepreneurial world. Oh, my God, we just take ourselves so seriously.
We do. Why do we do that?
And it's like, what?
Why? I actually don't take myself seriously. I take the piss out of myself all the time, because the only time I take myself seriously is when I'm trying to give my kids a sermon. And it's often when I'm driving.
And how's that going for you?
They hate my sermons because I can rant. Let me tell you, Reem, I can rant. You know, those Eastern European genes.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's what my brother passed on to me. You know, kill them with your ranting and they will do what they need to do.
Eventually they'll do it, don't worry.
Eventually. But no, what would you say, Reem? I was just thinking this as you were talking. You said that the imposter syndrome stops us from I guess, achieving our goals or taking that next step forward. And after speaking to you, you can kind of see how our thoughts kind of get in our way, and we actually get in our way because, we might take ourselves too serious, what have you. But what would you say? And I don't know if you have experience. I'd imagine you would, because you've had such a long career in this. What if someone comes to you and they've had a really crap really traumatized childhood where they've been berated or possibly even abused, and that's really kind of stagnated their own ability to perceive themselves in a way in which in a way that the world can perceive themselves, because I feel like adults that have gone through a level of trauma as a child struggle with imposter syndrome a lot more and a lot more viciously than someone that's had perhaps a healthy childhood.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And, you have to really tread lightly with that. And don't underestimate what people can go through. The biggest thing is this, right? By the time we're 35, whatever's happened to us in the past had happened to us in the past. We can't change our parents. We can't do it in all what's happened, or that you just can't change it, right? So it's coming to a real acceptance at the very end that, well, what do I want to do now? After 30, because you've formed 95% of your personality by the time you're 35 has formed. Okay. 95% of your behavior are a subconscious level, they've formed. Now, here's the interesting part. 50%, according to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza,
which I love, by the way.
50%, yeah, he's just amazing, right? 50% of our memories are made up by the time we're 35. So, and I'm not trying to, look, trauma is trauma. I'm not trying to belittle that, okay?
No.
So it's a question of what happens then is that every time something happens today, we go to the past and we search for evidence and data, and that data can be corrupt data, right? And we bring it to today and we relive those feelings. So we keep taking the same actions and we're creating our future from the past. Now, if your past has been great, one could argue, what's wrong with that? But if your past has been traumatic and it has been less than what you want, do you really want to continue to create your future from your past? Because the screen of our mind, we only see images in the present. It doesn't know whether it's happened, hasn't happened, or anything like that. It just thinks it's true because it's seeing it. So you're creating the same. Or do you want to say, enough, I want to short circuit this, and I want to go and create my own future, regardless of what's happened in the past.
That's radical acceptance, though, isn't it? Especially for people.
It's true. Well, yeah, absolutely. And the challenge with that is that you then have to ask yourself, is this my choice or is it someone else's choice? And if it's not your choice, who have you relegated your power to? Who have you given away your power to?
Yeah, that's
if you go, but I don't have a choice about this, you go, well, where's it gone? That's the whole point of free will. And I say this very carefully because I understand that different people have got different childhoods, certainly different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not an easy. Okay. But again, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to do now? Because life is about choices. It's a tough decision to make. You go, what do I want to do? Do I want to create a future based on what I want, regardless to what's happened in the past, and seek forgiveness for others and myself, and start knowing what we know about the mechanics of the mind, and building my future from the unknown, which is completely up to me? Or do I want to keep bringing that past, with me and dragging it? Human beings, by the way, are notorious for bringing things from the past. I mean, we see it at a global level. Why do we keep having wars? We've learned nothing. We're so immature. We really are. We're not that sophisticated.
That's another podcast,
right? So it is. Look, listen. That's why in the beginning I went, listen, we could be here for hours and hours. But it's good to be thinking about these things and questioning everything. So then the question becomes very simple: what do you want?
It always goes back to what do you want? And you know what? We ask that question. See, we asked our kids, what do you want to eat? What do you want? What do you want from me today? But to actually stop and really, really, and I'm going to challenge the audience and whoever's listening to this podcast and to just, put it in our comments and say, okay, so what do you want? Put in the comments, I want a better life. I want a better job. I want a bigger house. I want to drive a, Mercedes, or, I want to travel and never have to work again. What is it that you want? Once you are clear.
Or I want all of it.
Or I want all of it. All of the above.
It doesn't matter. What do you want?
Yeah.
That's it. And the trick, if you're talking to your audience right now, the trick is get out of the intellectual and go into the heart.
Yeah.
For whatever, because especially in the sort of the workspace, we've really become quite that. We've adopted the masculine space, and it doesn't mean it's bad, because this is really beautiful. The heart, the intellect is a beautiful, beautiful thing, right? But we've forgotten about our heart. But this is the master. This is the master. Don't make this the servant to those 60 to 90,000 what could be useless thoughts. You go to the heart first and then generate the 60 to 90,000 thoughts, which become very powerful. It's just that we've got it the other way around right now.
Yeah.
We go to the outside, we see what's happening everywhere. Do I like it? Do I not? And then we form the thoughts that brings down the feelings to the heart. Well, why not do it the other way? Because that's going to be more powerful. So you go internally, then you generate the beautiful 60 to 90,000 thoughts per day that are repeated 95% of the times, every day, day in, day out, that will all of a sudden, 80% of them will be positive, not negative. So you're switching things around.
Yeah. You're 100% right. I think, was it Joe Dispenza that did that research and measured heart energy and found that heart energy spreads wider than the mind? I think it was him.
He's just phenomenal in that he's taken it into the science world.
Which is what I love about it, because he takes the esoteric and then he explains it with science, and then he kind of go, I understand it. I'm a bit geeky like that.
So he's hitting it. Yeah, he hits it from all levels, because we operate on spiritual, intellectual, and then also a physical level. So why not hit all levels depending on what mood you're in that day? One day we could be very, very spiritual. We don't need anything. We're just like in love with everything. And it's really easy. Another day, depending on what the situation is, we could be really in the intellect. It's okay. He hits the intellect so beautifully. You just can't argue with it. Different days we could be just purely in the physical, so we actually need to adhere to that and show how the physical first is the most important, because without your health you're nothing.
That's true. That's true. Reem, it's been an absolute pleasure. And for those of you listening to us today and love what she has, jump on her website. We'll have all the deets on our website as well as on YouTube and on Spotify and Apple. But yes, please jump on her website and follow her Insta. What's your Insta? It's Reem, Dreem, is it Reem?
_com. It's a Reem_com.
_com.
Or is it Dreem? No, sorry, Dreem. I stopped knowing the difference between Dreem and Reem. You can call me whatever you want.
Oh, that's all right. We'll have it all up on YouTube.
Dreem_com. Yep.
But
thank you so much for your time. It's such a pleasure to be here as well.